What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Stan R. Mitchell Show. My name is Stan, and this week, before we get to the news, can we just start with some, good news? I had noticed a story about this, and I wanted to mention it. There is obviously so much just negative news out there, but out in the West, they have been experiencing a lot of dry weather and drought. And in Texas, this is pretty amazing. In Texas, they've been getting a lot of rain, and this has dramatically reduced the drought coverage across much of the state. And in fact, the statewide drought coverage has fallen to about 22% of Texas. And that is down from just 3 months ago. 76% of the state was dealing with drought. And so much of Central Texas, North Texas, parts of West Texas have improved significantly thanks to above normal rainfall in May, June, and July. So thank the Lord for that. And I'm sure those folks out there listening are appreciative of the fact that, it's been bad there. It's been bad in a lot of places. But I thought we'd just start with a little bit of good news. Of course, while the numbers in Texas are a little better regarding rainfall, the president's polling numbers have not improved. And it has not been a good week for him. I do plan on getting into that later in the show, but let's start with a much bigger topic. And no, I am not talking about Iran. Not that the war in Iran is not a big topic. It is. But it has not been dominating the news the past week. So let's talk about what has been dominating the news. And the thing that has really been dominating the news is the topic of Islam. And I thought we would start the show by discussing this in as balanced a way as possible. So let's just first set the stage with just some basic numbers and facts. Currently, Muslims make up about 4 to 4.5 million Americans, which is about 1.3% of the total U.S. population. That's obviously a very small number. And another number we need to look at is that Islam is currently the third largest religion in the country, following Christianity and Judaism. So these aren't huge numbers. They're just on paper, not even concerning numbers. So why are we talking about it? Why is it in the news? Well, over the past decade, Islam has become a much larger political issue in both Europe and the United States. And it's not simply because of the religion itself, but it's because of immigration, national security, and disagreements over cultural integration. Way across the water, over in Europe, countries such as Spain, France, Germany, Sweden, and the United Kingdom have experienced large-scale immigration from predominantly Muslim countries. Now, supporters of this, they argue that immigration has fueled labor shortages and that it's enriched society. But of course, you've been seeing a lot of criticism online, and critics have pointed out that there are a number of problems. That there are problems with integrating some immigrant communities, that there's rising support for Islamist extremism among a small minority of those who've come, and that there's even just basic logistical concerns such as pressure on housing, schools, and social services. And so all of these concerns have fueled the growth of a right-leaning set of political parties across Europe. Now here in America, coming back across the ocean to our side of the pond, so to speak, we're seeing a different but somewhat related trend. just this week in Michigan, in the Democratic Senate primary, it was won by Abdul el-Sayed. Now, if he's elected in November, he would become the first Muslim U.S. senator, which is a big deal. It would be a big first, for sure. Now, supporters of him would say his victory wasn't simply about religion, that he campaigned on a strong progressive platform, including Medicare for all, abolishing ICE. Obviously, ICE is not a very popular topic these days, and so he did campaign on that. He also campaigned on ending U.S. military aid to Israel, which is something that is a way to definitely, on the left and in some regards increasingly on the right, to gain support, is to talk about our support of Israel, and he definitely pressed in on that issue. So while that's the case, many analysts see his win as another sign that the Democratic Party's progressive wing is continuing to gain strength. Moderates think that these positions may not play well in a swing state. So we won't know the answer to that until November. But the reality is that there is a Muslim running in Michigan who could potentially become the first U.S. senator who is a Muslim. There have obviously been members of Congress already who are Muslim. But one of the reasons it's coming up as well is that there's New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani. I feel like he is in the news all the time. Whether people love him or hate him, he is constantly in the news. And his election was historic because he became the city's first Muslim mayor. But obviously, part of the truth is that he represents a new coalition of younger, progressive voters. And his Muslim identity was definitely part of the national conversation, but many of the debates surrounding him focused on the Democratic Socialist platform. Just like also with el-Sayed, it was his views on Israel, but there's also the future direction of the Democratic Party, not simply his faith. But all of this was really brought into the news this week because of what happened in the northern part of Africa, in a Spanish enclave, when about 60 to 70,000 Muslim Moroccans came across, mostly by water, into a Spanish enclave. Spain declared a state of emergency, and there was lots of alarm bells ringing across Europe. So increasingly, the media is focusing on this, as is the public. So what do we make of all this? Well, I think there are two mistakes that Americans can make. The first one is pretending that none of these issues exist. Radical Islam is real. Islamic terrorism is real. Some immigrant communities have struggled to integrate in Western democracies. These are legitimate issues that deserve honest discussion. But the other mistake is assuming every Muslim shares those beliefs. The overwhelming majority of American Muslims are ordinary citizens, doctors, business owners, teachers, veterans, and neighbors who simply want to live their lives. So painting millions of people with the same brush, it's neither accurate nor is it helpful. I had a Muslim friend in college who this was after 9/11, and he was asking me about my military background, and I had said something about kind of this same topic. And I said, some people say that you guys want to tear down the government and this and that. We were just having a frank discussion. And my friend described how there are different versions of Islam, and there are moderate versions, and he kind of jokingly said, hey, we left that part of the world because those on the far right in Islam are crazy. They're absolutely crazy, and we didn't want anything to do with them. And we went into this conversation about how many Muslims were actually helping our military as we tried to contain Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other radical groups. So there have been contributions made, there have been sacrifices made, but the conversation that's coming up now, the real political question, it isn't whether Muslims are becoming more influential. I mean, eventually every growing community gains political influence. The question that people are starting to ask is whether America can continue to integrate newcomers into a constitutional system that is built on religious liberty, equal rights, and the rule of law, and whether all Americans, regardless of faith, will place those constitutional principles above religious or ideological loyalties. And that is a conversation worth having. Now, I'm sure in the coming months this issue is going to grow. I'm sure the language and the arguments are going to change and zigzag and go left and go right. But in the end, we have to remember the constitutional principle that in America, Christians do not get special rights. Muslims do not get special rights. Jews do not get special rights. We all get the same rights, and we all have the same responsibility to uphold the Constitution, to preserve and protect this country. And I will also say that in the past, much of our immigration has been from historically Christian countries, whether we're talking about Ireland or Germany or Italy, or even parts of Mexico and South America. And these folks came here with an idea to support our Constitution. They wanted a chance at life and a chance at better economic freedom. And almost all of those demographics were discriminated against. The Germans were, the Irish were, the Italians were. For a long time even, Catholics were. The Protestants didn't want people who were loyal to Rome instead of America. So they were prevented from taking elected office, from some civil service jobs. Heck, even besides Catholics and those from Europe. As a country, during World War II, we rounded up Japanese and threw them into camps for our safety. That was the argument we made. But eventually, thousands would go on to volunteer to fight the Germans to help prove their loyalty to this country. So if I were speaking to the Muslim community, I would remind them that this isn't new. And I would also remind them that the burden of proof is on you. I would say don't fly flags that aren't American. I would say condemn publicly and don't support under any circumstance far-right Muslim pastors who support a theocratic government or a government that falls beneath Sharia law. If you think folks on the right are overreacting, then prove it by your actions and your words. Prove that they are wrong. Assimilate with our country. Support our country. Pursue economic freedom and become the best citizen you can possibly be. Don't mooch on the government. Don't steal or threaten violence. Police your own when others do that. It's really that simple. And yet, sadly, I don't think it will be that simple. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be talking about this and covering this for months and years to come. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Is this a political issue that will grow in importance? Or is it just something that's overhyped and not that big a deal? Let me know. You can either leave a comment or send me an email at stanrmitchell2012@gmail.com, which you can find in the episode notes. Again, that's stanrmitchell2012@gmail.com. And in a perfect world, short voice memos are both welcome and preferred. I would love to play someone's voice next week if you have strong thoughts on this. Just make sure you include your name and city. That's what I'd prefer to have when I do that introduction of your comment. We are going to take a short break, but when we return, we will get into the president's poll numbers and a bunch of other topics. So stick around. Quick reminder, if this show's been helpful, one of the best ways to support it is simple. Share it with someone you trust, or leave a review wherever you listen. Word of mouth still matters most. You can also follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you want to go a step further, there are support options in the show notes. A small monthly subscription is one option, or you can even do a one-time gift. Either way, I'm grateful you're here. So let's talk about the president's poll numbers. As you probably know, you don't exactly have to be a rocket scientist to know this, they are terrible. So CNN's got him at 34% approval. Quinnipiac, 32%. AP's got him at 33%. So basically, if you average 32, 33, and 34, you'd say it's about, 33%, right? So we'll say he's at 33%. We'll take a guess what other presidents at this point in their second term were sitting at. So again, we've got Trump at 33%. Well, we would say Biden, but he only did one term before absolutely bombing in a debate. So we can't really do him. He didn't do 2 terms. Before him was President Obama. And at this point in President Obama's second term, headed into the midterms, President Obama was at 43%. So he was 10% higher than Trump at 33%. The other 2-term president before Obama was obviously George W. Bush. So again, Trump's at 33%. What was Bush at this point? 37%. So about 3.5% better. Bush was at 37%, maybe 4% if you want to round up. Now, of course, Bush was fighting 2 wars at the same time by this point. So he had the Iraq War, he had the war in Afghanistan. But again, he was at 37%. We got Trump right now at 33%. How about Bill Clinton at this point in his second term? This was, I would have guessed like 40-something%, right? I mean, he had scandals and he had a Republican House. You had Newt Gingrich, who was really popular. Actually, at this point, Bill Clinton, Democrat Bill Clinton, was at 64%. Which, by the way, this shows how divided the country is now, because when I tell you the numbers for Reagan at the same point, you'll see a similarity. So again, Clinton was at 64% at this point. Reagan, just before Clinton, who also did 2 terms. Remember, Trump's at 33%. Clinton was at 64%. Reagan at this point was at 61%. So again, it reminds you, like, our country used to be way more united, way more in step. Didn't feel like the world was about to end every single day. Now, before Reagan, we go back to Nixon. So this is Nixon. Nixon at this point is the only one lower than Trump. He was at 24%. 24%, and obviously he would leave the presidency shortly thereafter. Before Nixon, there was Eisenhower. Now, these numbers, by the way, are coming from Peter Baker, the New York Times reporter. I should definitely credit him for that. But Eisenhower, at this point in the presidency, was at 58%. Again, pretty high numbers. Shows the country used to be way more united. And before Eisenhower, we had Truman, who at this point in the presidency was at 39%. Harry Truman. So the president is at 33%, and as I said, I don't think he gained any points this week. The Iran war is continuing. He has turmoil inside his cabinet, and he had the legal case at the fountain was dropped. I'll get into that probably later. But just not, he's struggling to get his Attorney General, Todd Blanche, approved. It's kind of up in the air. It may not even happen. It's not been a great week. By the way, the president trying to ram through Todd Blanche in a series of posts on Truth Social was absolutely ripping John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina. And I made the point, neither of these folks are cooperating with him now, which, as you guys recall, a few months ago I said would end up happening. Why? Because President Trump did not endorse them. He helped force both of them out, essentially. Well, the problem is they are sitting senators until they are removed from office in January. And the Senate is a very tight group of people, closely balanced. And he has made some folks mad. And so he rips John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina in a public post. And as I mentioned on social media, President Trump is learning some hard lessons about human behavior. When you treat someone like crap, don't be surprised when they stop doing what you want. So the president wasn't happy with these folks. He is now going after them even more harshly than he was before. He has no leverage on them because both are leaving office, and he's got to deal with them for about another 5 months. So we will see if Todd Blanche ekes into the Attorney General role full time. It will be close, and we'll just have to see on that. By the way, so far, I don't really understand the president's midterm strategy. Several times this week, and it seems to be happening more often of late, he has just been absolutely ripping what he calls democratic cities, which of course have huge populations, which Republicans need in November. But the language is getting even more, he is a coarse individual. That's the nicest way I could put it, on a good day. And I've told you guys before, I am center-right. I am not a fan of the president. I have never voted for the president. In previous elections, I was more, center-left. I came to my faith again 3 years ago, so that's been pulling me further to the right. But I am an old Republican back in the day, and I remember being told numerous times in the 90s that character mattered. I have not been a fan of the president's character. I know that many folks who share my faith would say, well, it's about policies and the 5,000 people that he would appoint, and I get that view. I respect anyone, whether you voted left or right. I ultimately am about us coming together and discussing things like adults. I have said before, and I will say again, that 5 things that I believe in is that America still has good people on the left and the right, that there are neighbors, co-workers, friends, and family, and if you were in trouble, many of them would help you in a heartbeat, regardless of which political party you or they belong to. I never want to lose sight of that. I have also constantly said that constant outrage is poisoning our country. I'm trying to obviously do what I can to stop that, because the outrage is driving us further apart, and it's making our language much harsher toward each other. I have the third thing. I have said numerous times, I believe you can disagree politically without hating each other. The fourth thing I've said, I believe both parties have too often put the good of the party above the good of the country. I don't think either party has a monopoly on wisdom or virtue. I believe compromise is necessary. I believe there's a reason George Washington warned us about the dangers of political parties. I believe he was right then. I believe he was still right today. And ultimately, my fifth thing, which is why I end every section of the show this way, I believe that real peace and hope doesn't come from politics alone. Those are the 5 core things that I believe, and I don't think I'll ever change. I think if we had someone on the left in the presidency right now, I would be just as harsh on them. I believe we deserve the absolute best of our elected officials. I believe we live in a constitutional republic or a democracy, whichever you prefer to call it, and that we are allowed to have free speech, and that we are at our best when we criticize our elected leaders, which leads to a better government, a better output in the end. So I just want to set all that up by saying that. And I set that up because if you're a new listener, you need to know where I'm coming from. And I still, even though I didn't vote for the president, I do my best to try to not name call. I try to show as much respect as I can. And I respect those who voted for him. I'm not like those who say, if you voted for him, you're dead to me. I don't want to talk to you. I think that's short-sighted and foolish. And I think we have to come together as a country. But with that very long preamble put out, the president's language towards cities is just starting to blow me away. And I don't think it's going to end well. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm just saying, for support for Republicans. I mean, this week he said, I'll quote, "You see it in the blue states run by Democrats. Everything is filthy, dirty all the time. The cities stink. The sidewalks are loaded with horrible stuff." I don't want to use the term because my wife hates it. She hates it when I imitate men and women's sports, but he goes on, he's just ripping it. And you can find so many clips of him. He increasingly does this. Now, are there parts of cities that are dirty and rough and dangerous? Parts that have druggies and homeless people? Yes, of course. And it's a small percentage of any city. Very small. But you still don't have to trash the entire city. There are Republicans from rural areas who drive into cities every single day to work or to take their wives to, places to dine or to shop. We don't have to use this language. And I'm old enough to remember when President Obama was campaigning and he said people cling to their guns and religion. He was absolutely ripped for that. Destroyed for that. It stuck to him for 8 or 10 years. I'm old enough to remember when Hillary Clinton used the term deplorables. That stuck to her the whole time. People would not let it go. And it's just amazing to me that the current president calls people the worst names. So you've got Obama who said they cling to their guns and their religion. You've got Hillary who said deplorables. Well, here's some of the terms Trump has used. Radical left Democrats, crazy Democrats, lunatics, communists, Marxists, socialists, fascists, that's one of the more recent ones, enemies of the people, crooked, such as Crooked Hillary, low IQ, weak, corrupt, deranged, sick people, thugs, scum, vermin, especially for political opponents, vermin, the enemy within. Let's keep it going. He's referred to some black politicians and public figures as low IQ, such as low IQ Maxine Waters, stupid, loser, nasty, racist, telling several members of the squad to go back to the countries from which they come, even though most were born in the United States. He questioned whether Barack Obama was even born in the U.S., which was the old classic birther controversy. And now let's move to women. He has a long history of personal insults toward women, especially female political opponents and journalists. Examples such as nasty woman, crazy, dumb, bimbo, dog, pig, horseface, talking here about Stormy Daniels, by the way, Pocahontas, talking here about Senator Elizabeth Warren, blood coming out of her wherever, talking about Megyn Kelly. He's constantly talked about women's appearance, their weight, their attractiveness. I mean, he almost takes pride in the way he talks in such vulgar language. I just remind people, like, this is language that if you heard your kids say, you'd smack them upside the head. And on the flip side, if there was some Democrat talking about folks in rural areas and overalls, or, I don't know, dumb hicks with shotguns or whatever, like, if it was flipped, you would not hear the end of it. And yet his language is so coarse, he just says it all the time, and all of us just shrug because we're used to hearing it. But I'm not sure what his political strategy is. I'm not sure how attacking cities and continuing this language and it just getting worse and worse, I don't know how he thinks that's going to actually somehow help Republicans in November. Let's move now to another reason that it was a rough week for the president. As you probably heard, Trump lost a lawyer and a big talking point this week. Of course, I'm referring to Washington, D.C., and the case of the reflecting pool, where a few weeks ago, Jeanine Pirro had said that, she had backed the president and was pressing charges, claiming that there had been damage done to the reflecting pool by somebody. I'm referring to the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, and this week, Jeanine Pirro, who was, and I assume still is, an ally and friend of the president going back decades, according to President Trump, she folded like an umbrella and, quote, choked after she withdrew charges against a man accused of destroying the lining of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. Now, Jeanine Pirro actually went public. Again, she went public and, including in court documents, demolished one of the president's, as I've heard people call, cherished narratives that vandals, and not a contractor, but vandals, had defaced a Washington landmark. So, of course, she gets called to the president's office, and Jeanine Pirro throws Doug Burgum, who's over the Department of the Interior, under the bus, and they have this big argument. So far, both of them still have their jobs. The president is continuing to maintain, and I'm just going to start using the word lies in this instance, at least, for sure, because in court documents, even his own attorney in D.C. is saying it's not true. But the president says that it was vandalism. Again, that is, based on court documents, a lie. I'm not sure why he keeps saying it. But this has been not a good week for him, because having her out publicly, although there is media reporting that she warned him ahead of time that she was going to do it, this isn't good because it hurts the argument that he was making. And so we got to say, why is she doing this? Well, did a little digging on previous attorneys who have done work for President Trump. And it typically does not go well. I thought I'd just run through a list of them. Many of these names you will remember, because this will help explain why Jeanine Pirro decided to look out for herself. Because she knows the president's term will end at some point, and while he may try to pardon her or whatever, there will still be real legal consequences. Let's run through the list just real quick. Rudy Giuliani did work for the president. was then ended up disbarred in New York and Washington, D.C. Can't even practice law. He's still fighting multiple civil matters. John Eastman, recommended for disbarment in California, facing state criminal charges, Arizona and Georgia. Sidney Powell pleaded guilty in Georgia to misdemeanor charges related to election interference. She agreed to cooperate, has faced disciplinary complaints, but has not so far been disbarred. Kenneth Chesbrough pleaded guilty in Georgia to one felony account involving false documents, later also charged in Wisconsin and Arizona. Continues to defend against these state charges. Jenna Ellis pleaded guilty in Georgia to one felony count of aiding and abetting false statements. Has been publicly censured by Colorado's Supreme Court. And then Jeffrey Clark. Criminal charges remain pending in Georgia, faced disciplinary proceedings over election-related conduct. Not a pretty record for any of them. And I think Jeanine Pirro realizes, especially as Trump's numbers are so bad, Republicans are starting to circle. I believe J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, others, they know that the president will have to pass the baton sooner rather than later. And the presidential election race will start up sooner rather than later. And I think folks are beginning to look to the future of the Republican Party without Trump in it. That's what I think is happening. And I think Jeanine Pirro, who is a very media-savvy person, she had decided that she had carried the president's water for long enough. That's what I think happened. And I think she was worried about her own ability to earn money as an attorney and any potential disciplinary proceedings that might follow if she continued pushing the case. I will say I give her props. I think she rushed into this and probably shouldn't have ever put the charges in place. That's kind of more than obvious. But she did rush into it. But unlike a lot of others, she did admit her mistake. And all of us make mistakes. And anytime someone admits their mistake, I give them props. Because increasingly in our political world, no one will admit when they are wrong. So, props to her for admitting what actually happened. By the way, if you want, I've got a gift link to an awesome story from the New York Times. Again, it's a gift link. You can read it for free about the unbelievable little meeting / battle that happened in the White House when Jeanine Pirro showed up and Burgum was there and the president. And the president loves it when people have these battles in front of him. I don't know if he's entertained by it, or maybe it reminds him of The Apprentice, or maybe he just likes letting people make their points. But it's a good article. And so you can read it for free if you want to go to the episode notes and click that link. Let's move to the war in Iran. As Democratic Senator Mark Warner said, President Trump can't stop flip-flopping. He threatens airstrikes on Iran, calls them off, claiming a deal is within reach, and talks end up collapsing again and again. And as Senator Mark Warner said, 5 months into this war of choice, there is still no end in sight. Now, there is a poll out that say most Americans believe the Iran war has failed and that it has not been worth the cost. On the other side of the ledger, just like I mentioned last week, there are a lot of conservative voices that are saying President Trump needs to end it, to go in all out, win it, quit messing around. But with every passing week, that seems less likely for the president to do. The latest as of Wednesday night is Iran is they're again talking about fees, somewhere between 5 to 7% of the price of cargo from ships that use the Strait of Hormuz. In theory, the fees are voluntary, as they're saying, but there's an implied threat that if they're not paid, you would get attacked by Iran. And then Oman on the other side of the strait is saying they want 3%, so looks like we are looking at a Strait of Hormuz that will not be free passage should that stay in place. I have said this for many months now, but this is a big change. Because for, I guess, at least a century, our Navy has helped ensure safe passage of ships throughout the world. We have allowed no country to control straits or narrow bodies of water because we believed that free trade was something that was worth preserving. And so if they leave some type of toll system in place at the Strait of Hormuz, this is a strategic failure. And it will empower Iran. And no matter how you spin it, the Iranian government is going to come out as a big winner of this. Of course, part of what seems to be behind this is there is lots of reporting. NPR talking about the U.S. running out of Patriot missiles. There was a big Reuters story that the U.S. has used almost all of its long-range precision missiles. The Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of War, depending on what you prefer to call him, has said that this is all not true, but it sure seems to most likely be true because it seems to be affecting our decision-making. Either way, we've got another week and not much has changed, and presumably the world's oil supply has again gone down, which, remember, the president a number of weeks ago said we only had about 4 or 5 weeks until this would have a real impact. And we are continuing to get closer and closer to that happening with very little oil moving through the Strait of Hormuz. So at some point it is going to affect all of our pocketbooks much worse than it already is. Alright, we're going to do a quick rapid round of news because there are a number of things that I just want to at least point out, make sure you're aware of. On the tariff front, tariffs, not very popular obviously, 25 states have sued the Trump administration. They say that what the president has done on the most recent tariffs is just a way to try to go around what the Supreme Court already struck down. Now, I'm not an attorney, but my gut says that those are probably a pretty serious case, I should say, and that I would tend to think the states are right. The Supreme Court already knocked us down. We'll have to see. I'm sure it'll take time. Moving along to the next topic, wanted to mention folks on the left are increasingly pointing out that Trump officials have been saying for a year that we would soon see 4%, 5%, or maybe even 6% GDP growth. There are tons of compilations of people saying this on video, not AI. Everyone remembers everyone saying this. GDP just recently came in at 1.5%. These are not the numbers that people were hoping for. And as the Wall Street Journal pointed out, part of this is because of the president's tariffs. But he is absolutely fixated on tariffs. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board again reminded him that most Americans, both his close fans and most Americans, wish he would drop his fixation on tariffs. But the president just seems like he will not do so. All right, moving to the next thing. Funding the budget. The Senate, which is one arm of Congress, obviously, passed a continuing resolution that will keep the government open until December 11th. That is not a law yet because the House will have to pass it. And a lot of folks are increasingly saying the House should not, go along with this without something out of it. Adam Kinzinger, former Republican congressman, he said, the fact that Democratic senators are agreeing to a continuing resolution until December 11th, which, by the way, is after the elections, with no compromises for them, for the Democrats, is absolute political malpractice and head-scratching. Why not try to ban anything like the Arch? Anything. And he makes a good point. Like, the Democrats could try to hold something up, get some attention on something that's unpopular, but doesn't look like they are going to, although people do seem to be talking about it, and so maybe the House will. I saw one person say, there should be no continuing resolution without full release of the Epstein files, full stop. So we'll see if Democrats begin to demand something. Speaking of the Epstein files, the state of New Mexico has sued the Department of Justice, as well as the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche on Wednesday, because they say the federal government has blocked the state's ability to investigate the sex crimes of Jeffrey Epstein at a ranch inside New Mexico. Kind of crazy. Reminder, I'm kind of a law and order guy. It would be nice if we could get these names and people who have done these things public and some type of criminal accountability. Let's keep the rapid round going. One other quick thing. New York Times is reporting the CIA is reported to have created a task force to enact a more concerted campaign to pressure Cuba's government. So anyone who thinks that the potential for some type of military action against Cuba is off the table, every week I mention some type of story like that. It seems like it is not going away. So did want to mention that. Now moving to Ukraine, there are about 4 stories that I'm going to put in the episode notes because we're running long on time. Please go check them out if you are keeping up with the Ukraine war. I think you will find all of them interesting. And again, just go to the episode notes. They are there. All right, let's get to the best part of the show, the faith section. So this week, I wasn't real sure what I wanted to share in the faith section, and as happens most weeks anyway, I don't want to say every week, that might be an overstatement, but as the show gets closer, you get a little more panicked about what you want to share, and I almost build it up too much in my mind. And I was kind of in that same mode this week, not sure what I wanted to share, and I was like, okay, I gotta quit panicking. I'm just gonna read part of a chapter in Psalms just to get my mind off of this, just where it was as I was going through the Bible. This is just part of where my daily pattern fell. And I read the chapter of Psalms, chapter 40, and I was like, wow, this is perfect. I'm going to read it. So I'm hoping that this is what I'm supposed to read this week. It's what it feels like. And so I hope this blesses and touches you in some way. I'm going to skip just a few verses from it, but this is most of Psalms chapter 40. I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see what he has done and be amazed. They will put their trust in the Lord. Oh, the joys of those who trust the Lord, who have no confidence in the proud or in those who worship idols. O Lord my God, you have performed many wonders for us. Your plans for us are too numerous to list. You have no equal. If I tried to recite all your wonderful deeds, I would never come to the end of them. I have told all your people about your justice. I have not been afraid to speak out, as you, O Lord, well know. I have not kept the good news of your justice hidden in my heart. I have talked about your faithfulness and saving power. I have told everyone in the great assembly of your unfailing love and faithfulness. Lord, don't hold back your tender mercies from me. Let your unfailing love and faithfulness always protect me. For troubles surround me, too many to count. My sins pile up so high, I can't see my way out. They outnumber the hairs on my head. I have lost all courage. Please, Lord, rescue me. Come quickly, Lord, and help me. May those who try to destroy me be humiliated and put to shame. May those who take delight in my trouble be turned back in disgrace. Let them be horrified by their shame, for they said, "Aha, we've got him now." But may all who search for you be filled with joy and gladness in you. May those who love your salvation repeatedly shout, "The Lord is great." As for me, since I am poor and needy, let the Lord keep me in his thoughts. You are my helper and my Savior. Oh my God, do not delay. Again, that was most of the chapter 40 in the book of Psalms. I like to end the faith section each week by saying that if you're skeptical or you're not sure if what I've shared is true or not, I'd like to encourage you to read the Bible for yourself. Not secondhand, not through headlines or arguments. Just open it and read. I've linked a Bible resource page in the episode notes that talk about translations and a good place to start. But if you don't want to click anything or take the time to read that short explanation I provide, just start with the book of Mark in the New Testament, and then read a little bit of Psalms or Proverbs each day. Let the text speak for itself. And if it's all a bunch of hooey or drivel, then you'll know pretty quickly that I'm off my rocker. But if it's the Word of God, then I think God will speak to you through the text. And I think if you're unsure, you shouldn't be afraid to read something. I know I've read many texts about Buddhism, Islam, other faiths, Hinduism, and none of those texts spoke to me. But the Bible did speak to me. And so my challenge is, open the book yourself. Read it as a skeptic. And see if it's full of absolute truths and feels like the Word of God. If you don't own a Bible or don't have one handy, there are free apps on your phone. There are bazillions of websites that have the Bible on it. So you can read it from your phone. One final word. If you're a veteran and you're dealing with depression, PTSD, or thoughts of suicide, please check out the link in the resource notes. We need you in this fight, and you cannot give up. After all, who is going to take care of your family someday? Do you really want your military friends to feel guilty they didn't check on you more? I know it's taboo to say that it's selfish, but it is selfish. There is a purpose for your life, and you're just dealing with a lot of pain right now that feels overwhelming. It can get better. Just do not give up. Thanks for joining me this week. If you'd like to support the work, there's a link in the episode notes. I always like to end each episode by saying that as you head into the coming days, try to be just a little kinder, both online and also out in the world. Remember that most Americans are good people, even if they vote differently than you do. Aim to be a little bit more disciplined this week than you were last week. Mentally, physically, and spiritually, raise the bar just a little. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to aim to be a little better than you were last week. When you fall short, forgive yourself quickly. Start again. Now, when the news discourages you, and I believe it will, because even on the best of weeks, the media is looking for bad news. But when the news discourages you, don't give up on this country. Try to remember that division weakens us. Unity strengthens us. This is wisdom, and it's also biblical. So guard what you feed your mind and your spirit. What you take in and absorb will shape what you become. Don't ingest poison. and that's mostly what cable news is. If you are a person of faith, make sure you make some time this week to spend time in your Bible. If you are not, try reading the Bible this week for the first time, or for the first time in a long time. You know what kind of results you're getting with what you've been doing. It might be time to try something new. Now, before we leave, I need to mention, on the off chance that you don't know, that I am an author in addition to being a podcaster. I write compelling stories that matter about courage, faith, and the fight for what's right. I've written 12 books to date. They are military thrillers, police detective mysteries or whodunits, war literature, a western. One of them is even a motivational self-help book. And I've been fortunate to have sold more than 70,000 copies to date. So thank you if you're one of those who have purchased one of my books. All of my books are available for sale on Amazon, but if you go there, the list can be a little overwhelming. So people say, what book do you recommend, Stan? I would recommend one of my top-selling books called Little Man and the Dickson County War. It is a fast-moving Western. It has tons of action, and it has one of the best unexpected endings that you will ever see. In fact, I was blessed enough that at one point this book climbed as high as number 16 on the Amazon UK paid list in the United Kingdom, and that was with no outside marketing, no book publisher pushing it, nothing. That was word of mouth and people talking about it on social media. So that's the book I recommend when people say, Stan, what book should I start with? I should also say before we end the show that if you believe what I'm doing on this podcast matters in this moment for our country, you could partner with the mission to help keep the show independent and steady. You can do that through either a monthly or one-time gift, and there are several ways to support the show in the episode notes. No pressure to do so, just huge gratitude if you do. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay humble, and keep working to be the light in your corner of the world. You've been listening to the Stan R. Mitchell Show.